Hi everyone. On 17th October, the Supreme Court pronounced its ruling against the 21 pleas seeking the right of queer couples to marry in a 3:2 ratio. The decision came nearly 5 months after the top court heard arguments for and against the plea. At the heart of this decision are various interconnected factors, including legal, ethical, religious, and societal considerations. In this context, understanding the multifaceted nature of marriage equality is essential for comprehending the profound impact as it has profound impact it has had on the lives of individuals and the broader societal fabric. In this edition of the Roundtable, organized by Nickel and Dime's Gender and Society Cluster, we will be discussing the discourse surrounding marriage equality, as it has been a pivotal aspect of the ongoing pursuit of LGBTQ plus rights and social equality post the same-sex verdict by the Supreme Court. Firstly, I would request the members to share the arguments surrounding marriage equality, how these arguments have shaped the ongoing debate, and how has the legal recognition of same-sex marriage would have influenced the rights and well-being of the LGBTQ individuals and their family. Sunil?
Yeah, so when we talk about the debate that is ongoing and the arguments that surround it, basically we have the people who oppose it, stating that it is against the cultural and traditional fabric of our country, and that it is morally not right, and we are heading towards a westernization of culture if we sort of introduce same-sex marriages. And also, like, supporting that the government also states that at this point, if there is a redefine, if the term family is redefined in such a way, it would actually influence the stability of the society, because such thing like this such people or such partnership would be a very minority part of the community, while the people who are supporting same sex marriage or who want these rights are basically believe are those who basically believe that a partnership or a relationship is not relevant to the gender, and that choosing your own partner is a fundamental right under the constitution. It's a right to live, and that by not providing you the right to legally come together in the form of in the institution of a marriage, you are discriminating and violating. And if such a right is provided to all these people, then they would have a much peaceful coexistence in the society with the other people. And of course they ask for marriage rights, because in India, marriage is like, if we talk with Indian perspective, and in like in on a worldly perspective also, a relationship goes to another, like, the idea of a relationship goes to another level when two people come together as married people and not just committed to one another. So yeah, that is like the basic crux or the argument that we're talking about when we talk about equality in marriage.
Does anybody else want to share their views?
May I go ahead? So I think Sunidhi has covered a lot of main points, but also bringing in it specific to the judgment, I think there have been two main contentions. The first thing is essentially the petitioners challenging the provision of the Special Marriage Act, calling it discriminatory towards same-sex couples, because it essentially the only secular law on marriage which only envisages marriage as a heterosexual union, and whereas the government, on the other hand, as Sunidhi mentions, looking at the construct of a family unit very essential and coming from a very heterosexual perspective and a patriarchal perspective around the construct of marriage. And secondly, calling the idea of a same-sex marital union as a lot of elitist urban concept and a Western construct, which Sunidhi has mentioned already. So I think it's interesting to read the general debate with the sort of argument going on in the case. Yeah.
Thank you, Zui. Sunidhi?
Yeah, I'd also like to add that when we talk about the contention of people in India, or people specifically stating that, the culture or the traditional ancient traditions would be affected, and this is the westernization, quote unquote, I think that would be a little like that would be a wrong thing to say, because something I read about, it's not like US, like this is particular to US, but since US is one of the major countries in the West, it is not like they have given same sex marriage like a green flag. They also have something called like the civil partnership, which is though identical to same sex marriage, but it is not like, it does not give the same level of rights, and there are certain places where it is not equivalent to the relationship of a marriage. So it would be a little arbitrary to say that we are westernizing a culture. In fact, all around the world, this is a debate, this is an argument, and this is nothing to do, like, it is not explicitly something to sort of threaten your culture or your tradition, because it is just about awareness that it has come in now, and people are getting to know about themselves, discovering it now, and all parts of the world are having almost similar issues to sort of incorporate it in their system.
Thanks, Sunidhi. So some of the arguments that I could narrow it down to from what you two talked about were that the traditional and the cultural aspect of family and how it has been crafted and how it has been put forth in the arguments, right? Like, I'm just going to quote what Mr. Tushar Mehta had to say in the court hall, right? So they said that the institution of marriage occupies a central role in sustenance and progression of humankind. The prominent component of a marriage are companionship, sexual intimacy, and most importantly, procreation. Marriage, from an individual perspective, serves the purpose of sustaining an individual's gene pool. From a societal perspective, marriage contributes towards proliferation of future generations for the sustenance of humankind. So just by this, we can understand how they frame a structure of family and how they try to marginalize the queer community by not just by saying that marriage is just for procreation, and that queer couples have generalizing that queer couples do not have the right to procreate, or the ability, let's say, to procreate. And another concept which talks about the westernization of the queer rights and queer movement, right? When we look at Indian history, we come to know that queer rights or queer existence of queer community in India is not new, or it has been invisibilized by the colonial rule, and I think that is completely not in the argument at all when they talk about the westernization or the or queer rights or queer community as an urban elitist concept. And especially when we talk about construction of family, right, they also refuse the adoption rights, and they would also refuse the surrogacy rights. So it not just says that they are not allowed marriage because they cannot procreate. It also talks about, it also passes a comment about how they cannot form a family that is suitable for a child development or the existence or the just functioning of a child, right? So moving on, so how do you guys think the intersection of religious beliefs and social morality impact the discourse surrounding marriage equality, and to what extent should religious freedom be balanced with the pursuit of equal rights of the LGBTQIA plus community?
So I think it's very interesting to look at first essentially general idea of religious freedom and equality, and not just in terms of marriage. And I think it's very interesting because Chandrachud was on the bench of this case and also was on a bench of few other cases where he's commented on that, especially the Shafin Jahan versus Ashokan KM case, which is very interesting because in his concurring judgment, he particularly also refers to the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and brings in the idea that other considerations should not matter when it comes to an individual's right to marry. Although I would say that in that specific judgment, he does not refer to gender that explicitly. He goes on discussing the religious discrimination or the religious sort of debates around right to marry in the Indian context. But I think that's a good ratio and a good precedent to argue the same-sex case. And talking again about the sort of religious freedom and equality, I think there should also be raised questions as to when we are talking about specific religious beliefs, whether a secular court like the Supreme Court should even adjudicate on such matters. And it takes me back to the dissent of Indu Malhotra in the Sabrimala judgment, which slightly comments on these ideas. But again, coming back to our debate on marriage equality and religion, I think one perspective, the fact that the petitioners themselves challenge a secular law, I think says a lot, because religion has always been something quite rigid in both in the legal perception of it as well as the social perception of it in Indian society. And the courts as well as the legislature have always treaded very carefully when deciding equality within marital institutions and religion. And I think the government's arguments also show that they are more interested in protecting the institution of marriage rather than the individuals who are part of such a relationship. So yeah, it's interesting to see the intersection of all these different ideas. Although I do feel, and I do agree with the fact that marriage is a statutory right. And I agree with that because the protections that marriage have are positive obligations on the state. So I definitely think that the state has the right to create specific criteria to marital relationships. But at the same time, I disagree with the minority judgment that the queer individuals do not have the right to civil unions, because I think that flows right from Article 21, and irrespective of whichever religious group any individual belongs to. And I think this has been reiterated in different ways in a lot of Supreme Court judgments in the past. There has also been an interesting observation in a division bench judgment, which is on, I think it was Deepika Singh versus, I can't recall the exact citation, but where I think it's a Chandrachud judgment of the division bench, where he also looks at non-conforming family structures. So I think it's quite a sad thing, the outcome of this judgment, but there are definitely things which can be looked at in different perspectives. So yeah, there is that argument of equality which has been going on in prior precedents, but let's see.
Does anybody else want to go ahead?
So I think Zui covered it like in a very detailed manner as to the how the religious beliefs in India or like in general in legal aspect are like pretty rigid and everything. I think in when we argue about same-sex marriage and equality in marriage at today's day and age in terms of religious beliefs, I think it is even more difficult because what the things that have actually transpired in the recent years or the recent developments, we can see there's a sort of non-tolerance amongst the people in the country, and the population in general. So at this point, if anything in terms of religion is being argued on the same sex marriage, it is most likely to be cause a little dishevel around the country in all, not just a particular religion, but overall in all those people who are like extremists or communists in that way. So that the judges in all, I feel they sort this thought process might have stop them from really taking a very harsh step, because if we read what Justice Chandrachud said, he doesn't and we were very hopeful of this judgment only because he was on the bench and he's the chief justice. His what the judgment he wrote, it states that how he actually he accepts that there are rights to the LGBTQ, but at the same time, since it's a five-judge bench and all of them do not think on the same lines, so this was a very diplomatic decision that had been taken, and it really did not help anyone in general, because all the directions or whatever the judgment has stated has already been like taken into consideration. But like this might be a little politically incorrect statement, but if we rely on the legislature, there are ministers of the ruling party, and the statement of the ruling party itself, which states that um, getting such a bill in the parliament is dangerous to the tradition, community, religion, and basically the whole cultural framework of India. So if it'll basically be a sort of a ping pong thing between the judiciary and the legislature, with each of them throwing it to the other person and really not reaching a conclusion. I don't think so this was relevant to religion, but this was a point that was relevant to be made in terms of how the judgment came out to be.
Yeah, so when we look at the precedents, right? Let's take, for example, I don't remember the case name actually. Oh yeah, the Sweetie case, where they had to interpret whether the Guru Chela system will belong to the Hindu culture or community or not, right? So when we look at precedents like this, I think it kind of poses a question of whether the code always has a lookout for the majority or like just religious communities in general, right? Also, just drawing a correlation to what the Bar Council of India had to say about the marriage equality petitions, it said 99.9% of the citizens of the nation's population disagree with marriage equality. So when we think about it, I may be drawing too much into this, but when you think about it, the social morality, I think, in the nation comes largely from what the majority religion has to say. I'm not saying the minority religions agree with the same-sex um, right to same-sex marriage, but do they have the power to influence an entire bench, let's say, right? Obviously, they can be a pawn, but yeah, sure. That's what I think. So, in what ways does marriage equality contribute to greater visibility and acceptance of atypical family structures, including LGBTQIA plus parents and non-binary or gender diverse individuals? How does this visibility influence societal perceptions and attributes toward diverse family arrangements? Any thoughts?
Can you repeat the question once?
Yeah. So basically, I asked how the marriage equality would have contributed to the acceptance of atypical familial structures, right? This might include LGBTQIA plus parents and non-binary or gender diverse individuals. So this visibility has a greater influence on the societal perceptions and attitudes towards the diverse familial arrangements. So what are your thoughts on it? Yes, maybe please.
I think visibility actually makes a lot of difference. So, like, I wouldn't say as a person when this idea, like, when in 2018, when I would say that was the time that I was actually aware of what's going on around, and I could understand. I was like mentally in the place to understand that what same-sex relationship is and how they're like different, and at the same time, they need to be respected and everything, like all of that. So initially, even as a person who's new to such a thing, because it is not thoroughly visible around, or it has not been very coexisting in our society or has been absorbed in our society, it was difficult for me to understand and accept. But the idea, but as soon as and as the time passed, and you see people around who feel that they're not criminals, who have the legal right to exist in that relationship, and then they come out on the face in that way, actually helps others who might not know about it, but actually see others going for it, make it and get more acceptable. It's not like they'll accept it on the face in the initial part, initially only, but since there is nothing to sort of protest against, or someone's not doing anything wrong or against the law, something illegal, they have no say to even like sort of disagree with it, like in the sense complaint about it. So slowly and slowly the society has absorbed, even if little, they have absorbed the urban areas that such relationships exist. So at this point, if marriage equality was implemented in India, and you see people, uh, such things taking place in our vicinity, and you're having marriages of same sex, I think that would have further helped people not just accept the marriage institution in that way, but the relationship also in that way, and understand that relationships do not really depend on gender. So visibility plays a lot of role, because all the visibility of gender equal same sex marriages or marriage equality is what we see on social media of people who probably are settled abroad in different countries which recognize such a marriage, um, doing all these ceremonies and everything. That is all the exposure technically we have about same sex marriages. So it makes a lot of difference when you really see it around you, it happening around you. Also, I'd like to add on the religion part, that how when we see historical precedents, it's not even about religion, because if we say the Guru Shishya like the Guru Chela Parampara, then we also had um, the guards in the Mughal courts who were like, I don't remember the term, but trans people who were guards in the Mughal harems, basically, because of how, they could guard the women, at the same time they could be inside. So there was no sort of issue like, they were very well existed into the society and the culture of India. So claiming that it will be a scar on the culture of India if we sort of accept it, or if we try to change it, that'll be a little like, which is not, it's not factually right. It is just your own sort of approach to a certain thing.
Does anybody else have to say something?
Also, like adding on to Sunidhi's point on visibility, I feel like even though same-sex couples have a right to cohabit together, but there are many instances wherein the society doesn't accept that actually. For example, there are many news articles on how there are people who do not want their tenants to be a same-sex couple, and they throw them out. So visibility and acceptance of the society is a very important factor in that. So this judgment could have rearranged the existing societal structure in that matter.
Sampada?
Yeah, I wanted to talk a little bit more about representation. Sunidhi pretty much covered it all, but it helps break stereotypes. And one thing I was hoping we could talk about was the bench for this judgment. It was I was reading about this in an article. It was four cisgendered heterosexual judges, and the woman on the bench, she didn't even give her judgment. So it really makes you think about how maybe the verdict would have been different if we had a more diverse sort of given their verdict.
Bhumika, did you have something to say?
Oh no, I did, but then I think Anushka covered it. I was just gonna say how, you know, like right now, since there's no representation, people are afraid to be seen as part of LGBTQA. So they can't, even if the society in general, they see someone who's part of the LGBTQA, they see it as taboo. So if this same-sex marriage would have been given institutional backing, at least it would have come out a little in the open. I'm not saying it would have instantly led to acceptance of such marriages, but at least it would not be seen as something so strange. For sure people would have been against it, but then those kind of walls would have broken down a little, so they're at least open to the idea, okay, these things exist, and even if we don't agree to them, they do exist. So it would have been good to have them in the open, these marriages.
Yes, Zoe.
I think in addition to visibility, because when we talk about a marriage, we talk about the state protections that are in existence in these relationships, and something which Chandrachud judgment does highlight, and which is very pertinent when we talk about same-sex unions. And whenever we have that protection, that I feel that improves the acceptance that these relationships have in society. to some extent. And I think we've seen that post even the Special Marriage Act. Although the situations of interfaith and intercaste couples, there are still a lot of discriminations and honor killings which they face. But there has been a general level of acceptance with when the law is now standing with them and providing them protection and their rights. And also, in addition to visibility for the union, it also impacts the individuals that are part of such marriages, because then you have protections against domestic violence from your partner. You have division of properties between spouses. You have adoption rights, which unfortunately the judgment very specifically stated no. But I think this judgment does one positive thing, which is that it recognized the rights of transgenders and intersex people who were in heterosexual unions to get married under the Special Marriage Act as well as the personal law. I think that was a good step with the law stating with them. So maybe we might have more visibility in those unions. Yeah, obviously taking away from the same-sex union debate as well. But I think this is one tiny positive step that the judgment did take. Yeah.
Speaking about that, right? I think it was already sort of implied from the precedents that transgender persons had the right to marry. Again, it narrowed down their right to just what they termed as heterosexual relationship, right? Also, just adding on to all of your points, I think the traditional understanding and the cultural implication of how a family should be constructed is largely forced into a binary. And acceptance sure doesn't come right after the judgment, right? The legality and the implication or the practical aspect of it is completely different. But when you think about the Transgender Persons Right to Protection Act as well, I think NALSA was a stepping stone. I do not completely agree with what we got from the legislation, but again, it's a stepping stone. It takes you somewhere. I think when we look at the precedents on what led us to marriage equality petitions, it had a lot of backing, not just constitutionally, but from what the judges interpreted from various factual situations, right? I don't really see our judgment being proceeding as such. But I do think that someday we might. Just a hope, I guess. So thank you so much for joining today with us for the roundtable. It was hopefully comprehensible. So thank you so much.